Anna stood behind the bar, absently polishing a glass. Her eyes glazed over as she watched the sea of well-dressed patrons mingle in the upscale restaurant. It wasn't the first time she'd witnessed the elegant flow of this world she was only a small part of. The high-end suits, the diamond-studded smiles, the conversations about corporate deals and vacations to exotic islands, it all felt like a distant dream. Her reality, on the other hand, was about as far from this life as possible. Her phone buzzed again, and Anna glanced down. The notification from her bank stared back at her, reminding her of another missed payment, another mounting bill. Her heart sank. This wasn't how she imagined her life would go. Her family was drowning in debt, and her mother's medical bills weren't getting any cheaper. Every day felt like she was sinking deeper, and the pressure to stay afloat was suffocating as she reached for another glass to wipe down. A voice interrupted her thoughts. "Excuse me." Miss Anna turned, her eyes meeting a tall man standing at the end of the bar. He was impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, his dark hair styled perfectly, and his posture exuded the kind of quiet confidence that made her feel small in comparison. His piercing blue eyes studied her with an intensity that made her feel oddly, uncomfortably yet strangely captivated. "Can I talk to you for a moment?" he asked, his voice smooth, with just a hint of authority. Anna hesitated. "Sorry, I'm kind of busy right now. Do you need something?" He didn't flinch at her bluntness. Instead, he stepped closer, his presence commanding her attention. "I'm Lucas Knight," he said, offering her a handshake. His grip was firm, confident, the kind of handshake that felt like a business deal in the making. "I think we can help each other out." She arched an eyebrow, trying to place his name. "Lucas Knight. Should I know you?" He smiled slightly, but it wasn't warm. "Perhaps not. But I know you, Anna." Her heart skipped a beat. "Excuse me. I've been following your situation for a while now," he continued, his voice still calm, but with an edge that made her uneasy. "I know about your family's financial struggles, your mother's medical bills, the debts piling up." Anna's stomach twisted. "How do you know all that?" Lucas shrugged, almost nonchalantly. "I make it a point to learn about people I might do business with." Anna felt a chill run down her spine. This was far too strange for her liking, but something in his words made her wonder if he was right. She didn't have many options left. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice tinged with suspicion. "A business arrangement," he replied without hesitation. "A very lucrative one for you." Anna's eyes narrowed. "Business arrangement? I'm not interested in anything shady." Lucas didn't react to her harsh tone. Instead, his expression remained composed, almost bored. "Nothing like that. I need a wife, Anna, and you need money to help your mother." Anna blinked, sure she had misheard him. "A wife? What are you talking about?" "I need someone to marry me," Lucas said, his voice steady. "For 1 year. After that, you'll get a significant sum of money, enough to pay off your mother's bills and set you up for the future. I'm offering you a way out of this mess you're in." The words hung in the air, surreal, and for a moment Anna didn't know what to think. A marriage? A contract? It sounded absurd. She shook her head, trying to process it. "I don't even know you," she replied, her voice shaky. "Why would I marry you? For money? That's insane." Lucas didn't seem bothered by her shock. "You're smart, Anna. I've done my research. Your mother's illness is your top priority, and I can help with that. You'll get $500,000 up front, and the rest when the contract is complete. You'll be free to walk away after a year. Anna's mind raced. This was crazy, but she knew deep down that her options were dwindling. The money would save her family, save her mother. But at what cost? And what's in it for you? She asked, her voice betraying the confusion inside her. I need a wife to satisfy a clause in my grandfather's will, he explained, his voice devoid of emotion. I have to be married by my 35th birthday, which is in 6 weeks. And I need a child to secure my inheritance and keep control of my company. That's where you come in. Anna could feel the weight of his words. He wasn't asking for her love. He wasn't asking for a real marriage. It was a contract, a transaction. She'd give him an heir, and in return, she'd get the financial security she desperately needed. For a moment, Anna considered walking away. This was too much. But then she remembered her mother's face, the woman who had sacrificed everything for her. This could be her chance to fix it all, to make everything right. She could help her mother. She could save her family. I need time to think, Anna said, her voice barely above a whisper. You have 24 hours, Lucas replied, standing up. If you decide to accept, I'll make the arrangements. If not, we'll never speak again. He turned and walked away without another word, leaving Anna standing there, her mind spinning. She had a choice to make, but it wasn't a real choice, was it? Anna stared at the spot where Lucas had been standing. It felt like her entire world had shifted on its axis. Her options had been narrowed down to a single, terrifying decision. Should she marry a stranger in exchange for the chance to save her mother? The question echoed in her mind as she reached for her phone, her hands trembling. Was this the only way out? The next day, Anna couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. What should have been just another routine day at work now seemed like the beginning of something much bigger, something she wasn't prepared for. After her shift ended, she headed straight home to her tiny apartment, her mind still swirling with Lucas's offer. It felt like a dream, or rather a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. A year of marriage to a stranger, a marriage of convenience. Was she really considering this? Her phone buzzed, pulling her out of her thoughts. It was a message from her mum, asking how things were going. Anna sighed, running her hand through her hair as she texted back a brief reply. It was always the same, her mum, asking, concerned, but never knowing the full story. Anna had done a good job of keeping her struggles hidden from her. But the reality was that her mother's medical bills were mounting, and no matter how much Anna worked, there was never enough to cover them. The knock at the door startled her, and she opened it to find her roommate, Carla, standing there with a concerned look on her face. Carla had been her best friend since college, and while Anna kept her emotions tightly guarded, Carla always seemed to know when something was wrong. Hey, are you okay? Carla asked, stepping into the apartment and immediately sensing the tension in the air. You've been acting weird all day. Anna smiled weakly, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. Yeah, just a lot on my plate right now. Carla raised an eyebrow. A lot on your plate. Or is it more than that? You've been distant, Anna. What's going on? Anna hesitated. She'd never been the type to share her problems openly, not even with Carla, but today felt different. Maybe it was the pressure she'd been carrying, or maybe it was the weight of Lucas's proposition that had broken her reserve. She didn't know how to explain it, but she needed to get it off her chest. I met someone, Anna said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Carla's eyes widened. Oh, and Is he cute? Anna laughed, though it was a hollow sound. That's not it, Carla. He's a billionaire, a billionaire. Carla repeated, her tone disbelieving. You, a billionaire. Anna shook her head, feeling ridiculous. It's not what you think. He's not some charming playboy or anything like that. He's cold, businesslike. He offered me a deal. A deal. Carla frowned, sensing the seriousness in Anna's voice. What kind of deal? A marriage contract, Anna said, staring at her feet. He needs a wife. For a year. And in return, I get the money to cover my mum's medical bills. Enough to make sure she's taken care of for the rest of her life. Carla stared at her, mouth slightly open. Wait. So you're telling me this guy wants to marry you? For a year, and you're actually thinking about doing it? Anna sighed, sitting down heavily on the couch. What other choice do I have, Carla? My mum's not getting any better. I can't keep working 3 jobs and barely making ends meet. And this is my chance to finally help her. To fix everything. But marrying a stranger, Anna. Carla said, sitting beside her. That's insane. It's not just about the money. What happens after a year? What happens if you get hurt? Or worse, what if he's not who he says he is? Anna looked at Carla, her eyes filled with uncertainty. I don't know. I don't know what to think anymore. But I have to do something. I can't just stand by and watch my mum suffer. Carla looked at Anna, her expression softening. I get it. You're doing this for your mum. But this is huge, Anna. It's not just a deal. You're talking about your life, your future. Don't do something you might regret. Anna took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her decision. The truth was, she didn't know if she was making the right choice. But her mother's health was deteriorating, and every day felt like it was slipping further away. This was her chance to fix it all. Later that evening, Anna arrived at Lucas's penthouse office. The sleek, modern space was filled with glass and steel, everything meticulously designed to exude power and wealth. She stood outside his office door for a moment, hesitating. Was she really about to sign her life away? For a year? It felt like a bad dream, one that she couldn't wake up from. Lucas's assistant greeted her with a polite smile, leading her into his office. Lucas was sitting behind a massive desk, his sharp features illuminated by the soft glow of the desk lamp. He didn't look up as she entered, but he gestured for her to sit down. Anna, he said, his voice smooth but detached, like he was discussing a business deal, not a marriage. I trust you've had time to think about our arrangement. She nodded, her palms sweating as she sat across from him. I've thought about it, she said, her voice trembling, and I'm willing to go through with it. Lucas looked at her for a long moment, his eyes scanning her face as if calculating her every move. Finally, he nodded. Good, we'll start the paperwork. As he slid a folder across the desk to her, Anna's heart pounded. The papers inside were thick, official-looking, with legal jargon that made her head spin. She took a deep breath, signed the documents, and pushed them back toward him. There we go, Lucas said, looking at her with a faint, unreadable smile. From this moment forward, you'll be my wife, Anna. For the next year, at least. Anna felt a cold chill run through her. The deal was done. She was now bound to a man she barely knew, for reasons that were purely financial. She didn't know whether to feel relief or dread. Tomorrow, we'll make the announcement, Lucas continued, not noticing her silence. The public will know that we're married. It'll be seamless. You'll start living here with me, and we'll maintain the image of a happy couple for the duration of our agreement." Anna nodded, her thoughts swirling in a haze. This was happening. She had no choice but to follow through now. She stood up, ready to leave. But Lucas's voice stopped her. "Anna," he said, his tone unexpectedly soft. "One more thing. For the duration of our marriage, you'll be mine. And I expect you to play the part of my wife well." She paused at the door, her hand on the handle. "I understand," she said quietly, her voice barely audible. But deep down, she knew that she was stepping into something far bigger than just a business deal. The next morning, Anna stood in front of the full-length mirror in her small, modest apartment, adjusting the simple black dress she had picked out for the day. Her heart was still racing from the previous night's events. The weight of the contract she had just signed pressed heavily on her chest. She glanced at her phone, the notification reminding her of another round of overdue bills. The reality of her decision had settled in, but she had made it. She had to move forward today. Everything was about to change. She pulled her hair back into a sleek ponytail and grabbed her purse. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't escape the feeling of dread settling deep in her stomach. But she couldn't turn back now. She had made her choice, and this was the life she would have to live for the next year. Lucas's penthouse was nothing like the small apartment Anna had called home for the past few years. The sleek, modern design of the space was almost overwhelming. Everything was glass, steel, and polished marble. It was impressive, in a way, but it felt cold, sterile. There was no warmth here, no comfort. Lucas greeted her at the door as if nothing had changed. His suit, as always, was perfectly tailored, and his expression was as unreadable as ever. "Anna," he said smoothly, his voice betraying no hint of emotion. "Good to see you on time." She nodded, stepping into the space that was now, in a sense, her home. The sudden realization hit her again. This was her life now. For the next year, she was legally tied to this man, living in his world, pretending to be his wife. "Here," Lucas said, handing her a set of keys. "These are for the penthouse. Your personal suite is upstairs. You can unpack whenever you're ready. You'll be living here, obviously." She hesitated, taking the keys from him. "And what happens now?" "Now?" Lucas raised an eyebrow, his gaze shifting toward her. "Now we begin the public portion of the contract. In a few hours, we'll attend an event downtown. It's a charity gala, and the press will be there. You'll play the part of my wife's smile. Act like everything's perfect. Just like we agreed." "Right," Anna said, her voice barely a whisper. She wasn't sure how much longer she could keep up this act, but for now, all she could do was nod. The evening arrived faster than Anna had expected. By the time she finished unpacking her things and settled into the pristine guest room Lucas had prepared for her, it was already time to leave for the gala. She looked at herself in the mirror one last time, adjusting the neckline of her dress. Her reflection looked perfect, too perfect. She didn't recognize the woman staring back at her. The dress, a simple but elegant black gown, clung to her curves in a way that felt foreign. Her makeup was understated, her hair neatly styled. Lucas was waiting for her downstairs, looking as polished and composed as always. His gaze flickered over her, and for a moment there was something fleeting passing through his eyes. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by his usual stoicism. "You look fine," he said, his voice indifferent as he opened the door for her. Anna didn't reply. What could she say? Fine was about as much as she could expect from him. The gala was being held at a luxury hotel downtown. The atmosphere was opulent, a blur of champagne flutes, expensive jewelry, and laughter that sounded like a performance. Anna kept her head down, staying close to Lucas as they navigated through the crowd. She smiled politely at the people who approached them, shaking hands, exchanging pleasantries. She was just a prop, she realized, a perfectly polished ornament beside him, a woman with no real place here other than to make Lucas appear more relatable. As much as she hated to admit it, she wasn't even sure if she was still human to him. She was a piece of business, a pawn in his carefully constructed empire. The flash of cameras snapped in the background, and Anna reflexively smiled, feeling like a mannequin on display. The world around her faded into a blur of noise and colors, and all she could focus on was the grip Lucas had on her arm as he guided her through the crowd. "Smile," he whispered, his voice low but commanding. "We have to look convincing." She did as he said, plastering a perfect smile on her face. It wasn't real, but it had to be. Later that night, after the gala had ended, Anna found herself back in the penthouse, her body aching from hours of smiling and posing for pictures. The exhaustion was overwhelming, and she couldn't shake the feeling that everything about her life had changed in one fell swoop. The luxury, the wealth, the attention, none of it was real. None of it was hers. She was just a temporary fixture in Lucas's life, part of a deal. She sank down onto the couch in the living room, the weight of everything pressing down on her. The door to the study opened, and Lucas stepped inside, taking off his jacket and loosening his tie. "You did well tonight," he said, his eyes scanning her face. "You looked like the perfect wife." Anna didn't know how to respond to that. "I did what I had to do." Lucas's expression softened just slightly. "Don't mistake this for anything other than business, Anna. I won't ask anything of you that goes beyond what we've agreed. Just remember that." She looked up at him, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "Business, right." He stood still for a moment, his eyes locked on hers. For a brief second, Anna thought she saw something flicker in his gaze, but then it was gone, buried under the same stoic mask he always wore. "I'll be in my office," he said, turning to leave. "Rest up. You'll be required for more events like tonight. This is just the beginning." Anna nodded, though she wasn't sure if she could continue this act much longer. She had agreed to the contract, but now that she was here in his world, she felt more alone than ever. She wasn't sure what she was more afraid of, the year she had ahead of her or the emotions that were beginning to stir in her heart. The following week felt like a blur. Days bled into nights, and Anna's life had become a routine, attending high-profile events with Lucas, smiling for the cameras, and trying to keep up the facade of a happy couple. But behind the polished exterior, things were far more complicated. She woke up early every morning, spending hours in front of the mirror, perfecting her appearance. Lucas had made it clear. She had a job to do, and it was to make their marriage appear real, even if it wasn't. At first, it seemed like a simple enough task. But as the days passed, the weight of living in this carefully constructed lie began to press down on her. That morning, after a charity event where she and Lucas had spent hours shaking hands and posing for pictures, Anna found herself sitting alone in the penthouse's luxurious living room. She was supposed to be part of the after-party, but she couldn't stomach another fake smile, another hand to shake. She had retreated to the solitude of the vast space, the only sound in the room the soft hum of the city below. Her legs were curled underneath her as she sat on the sofa, staring at the city lights through the floor-to-ceiling windows. She felt disconnected from everything, her mind spinning with questions she wasn't sure she had the answers to. Why did I agree to this? She thought to herself, her fingers absently tracing the edge of the coffee table in front of her. Why am I doing this to myself? Footsteps broke her from her thoughts, and she turned to see Lucas standing at the entrance to the room. He was dressed in his usual formal attire, but tonight his tie was loose and his jacket was off, giving him a slightly more relaxed appearance. "I was looking for you," he said, his voice calm but with an edge she couldn't quite place. He walked toward her, the sound of his footsteps the only noise in the otherwise quiet room. Anna straightened, trying to appear composed, though she felt far from it. "I just needed a moment," she said softly, not meeting his gaze. "It's been a long day." He stopped in front of her, looking down at her with those cold, calculating eyes of his. There was something about the way he looked at her, something that made Anna feel both seen and invisible at the same time. It was unnerving. "You've been doing well," he said after a long pause. "The events, the public appearances, you've played the role perfectly." Anna's heart clenched. The role. That's all she was, an actress in a play, performing for an audience that never saw her as anything more than a pretty face. She had to remind herself that this was what she had agreed to, a contract. "Nothing more. Thank you," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. She didn't want to hear it any more, the praise that felt so hollow, so meaningless. Lucas sat down next to her on the couch, his presence like a heavy weight pressing down on her. He was so close that she could feel the warmth of his body, the faint scent of his cologne, but she didn't dare move. The silence stretched between them, thick and uncomfortable. Finally, Lucas spoke again, his tone lower than before. "You've been distant, Anna." She stiffened, her stomach dropping. "I'm not distant," she said quickly, but her words felt hollow, even to her own ears. "I'm just ... tired." He turned his head slightly to look at her, his gaze piercing. "I'm not talking about the events. I'm talking about you. You don't seem like the same person I met that night. You're pulling away." Anna's throat tightened. How could he see that? She had been careful to hide her emotions, to keep up the act. But somehow, Lucas always seemed to notice. She didn't know if it was his observant nature or just the way he could read her so easily. Either way, she felt exposed. "I'm not pulling away," she lied again, though she wasn't sure if she was convincing him or herself. "I'm just not used to all this ... attention. It's a lot to take in." Lucas watched her for a moment, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Is that really it?" His voice was quiet now, almost like a whisper, but there was an intensity in it that made Anna uneasy. "Because I don't buy it, Anna." She didn't know how to respond. The truth was, she didn't know what was happening between them. She was supposed to be married to him for a year, a mere transaction. There shouldn't be anything else, and yet, the longer she stayed in his world, the more complicated it became. She wasn't sure if it was the loneliness of this new life or if it was something else entirely. But she was beginning to feel something she couldn't ignore, but she wouldn't admit it. Not to him, not to anyone. Not when everything she had worked for was hanging in the balance. She couldn't afford to let emotions get in the way of what she had to do. "I'm fine, Lucas," she said, forcing a smile onto her face. "Really, I'm just adjusting." He didn't seem convinced, but he didn't press her further. Instead, he stood up, his expression unreadable. "All right, but if you ever want to talk, You know where to find me." Anna didn't reply. She just nodded, her eyes following him as he walked toward the door. She could feel the space between them widening again. The distance he had accused her of pulling away from felt real now. She didn't want it, but it seemed inevitable. Later that night, as she lay in bed, the silence of the penthouse settling around her like a heavy blanket, Anna couldn't shake the thought of Lucas's words. "I'm not talking about the events. I'm talking about you." What had she become? The woman in the mirror was no longer the Anna who had moved to this city with dreams and hopes. She wasn't sure who she was anymore, not when her every move, her every smile, was part of a contract, part of a life she never wanted, a life she had been forced into. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand, breaking the stillness of the room. She reached for it, not surprised to see a message from Lucas. She had learned by now that he didn't leave her much space between their interactions. "Lucas, don't forget to prepare for the gala next week. Same deal as before. Smile, look happy, play the part. Let's keep up the illusion." Anna stared at the screen, the words feeling like a slap in the face. The illusion. That's all she was to him. That's all she had ever been. Her finger hovered over the reply button. She wanted to tell him the truth. She wanted to scream at him. But instead, she simply typed, "Understood." The weight of her decision hung heavily in the air. Tomorrow would be another day, and the act would continue. But deep down, Anna knew something was shifting, something inside her that she couldn't control, and she had no idea how long she could keep pretending. The days that followed felt like an endless blur of public appearances, high society parties, and charity events. Anna had quickly learned how to perfect the art of smiling, of pretending everything was fine, of fitting into a life that wasn't hers. She had become so accustomed to the routine that it felt like second nature now. But the more she played her part, the more she found herself questioning just how much of herself she was losing in the process. Lucas, as always, remained a mystery. He was the perfect husband in public, charming and composed, but cold and distant when the cameras were off. She had grown used to the polite distance he kept between them, but lately she couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more lurking beneath the surface, something that wasn't as easy to ignore as before. That evening, after another gala where she had danced and laughed with people she didn't know, Anna found herself in the penthouse again, this time without the usual press or social obligations. She was in the kitchen, making herself a late-night cup of tea, trying to shake off the exhaustion that clung to her like a second skin as she reached for the kettle. The soft sound of footsteps behind her made her pause. "Another late night, huh?" Lucas's voice broke the silence, and she turned to find him standing in the doorway, watching her. He was dressed casually, now jeans, a t-shirt, and no tie. For a moment, he seemed ... normal, real. "I couldn't sleep," Anna replied, her tone guarded. She hadn't expected him to be home this early. He walked into the kitchen, his presence filling the room in a way that felt both imposing and oddly comforting. There was something about being around him that unsettled her and calmed her all at once. Lucas leaned against the counter, arms crossed, as if he were waiting for something. She could feel his gaze on her, but she refused to meet it. "I don't think I've seen you relax once since we got married," he said, his voice quieter than usual. There was a hint of curiosity behind the words, like he was genuinely trying to understand. Anna set the kettle down and forced herself to focus on the task at hand, avoiding his eyes. "I've been busy," she replied shortly, her voice flat. Lucas didn't press her. Instead, he reached into the cabinet and pulled down a glass. He filled it with water and drank, his eyes still on her. You know, I didn't expect it to be like this. I thought you'd be more ... compliant. She looked up at him, startled by the bluntness of his words. What do you mean? He put the glass down, his expression unreadable. You've been distant. I don't know if it's because you're just here to do your part, or if it's something else. Anna frowned, her heart beating a little faster. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that every time I try to connect with you, you shut me out, Lucas said, his voice almost a calm. He wasn't angry, but there was an edge to his words that made Anna feel like she was walking on thin ice. Anna took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. Lucas, I'm just trying to keep things professional. This is a business arrangement, right? Nothing more, nothing less. Is that all it is to you? He asked, his gaze piercing. She opened her mouth to reply, but no words came out. She realized, in that moment, that she didn't really know what it was anymore. The lines between the contract and reality had begun to blur, and she hated it. She hated that he had the power to make her feel this way. Before she could respond, Lucas spoke again. I get it, Anna. I do. This is a contract, and you're doing your job. But I didn't sign up for a marriage where we can't even talk to each other without it feeling like we're on opposite sides of a wall. Anna didn't know how to reply. She was trapped between her own guilt and the growing realization that, somewhere along the way, she had allowed herself to care about him at least a little. And that terrified her. The next day, the tension between them hung heavy in the air, like a cloud neither of them was willing to acknowledge. They had to go to another event, and this time, it was a small fundraiser for a charity Lucas supported. The media would be there, and as always, Anna had to smile and act like everything was perfect. But as they entered the venue, Anna felt the eyes on them. The questions, the whispered comments. They were the perfect couple, weren't they? The billionaire CEO and his beautiful, composed wife. Lucas didn't look at her as they walked down the red carpet, and for a brief moment, Anna felt like she was walking alone. The smile on her face felt like it was glued on, her every step calculated, controlled. She tried to remind herself that this was all part of the deal. Just a year and she'd be free. Later that night, after another evening of polite smiles and forced conversations, Anna found herself back in the penthouse. The exhaustion from the day's events weighed on her, and she was grateful for the silence that greeted her as she stepped into the living room. But when she looked up, Lucas was standing there again, waiting for her. His jaw was clenched, his brow furrowed in a way that made Anna's chest tighten. I'm not sure how long we can keep doing this, he said, his voice low and serious. She stopped in her tracks, her hand still on the doorframe. What do you mean? This, he gestured between them, his tone heavy. You keep shutting me out, and I can't pretend anymore that everything is fine. Anna felt a pang in her chest, a discomfort that she couldn't shake. She had been avoiding him, but now that he had called her out, she didn't know how to explain it. She didn't know how to explain the way she had started feeling how confused and lost she felt in this marriage that wasn't really a marriage at all. I don't know what you want from me, Lucas, she said, her voice wavering for the first time. I've been doing what we agreed to. I'm playing the part. I'm doing my job. He looked at her, his expression softer now, almost tired. You don't have to keep pretending, Anna. Not with me. You don't have to be perfect. Just be real. The words hit her harder than she expected. Just be real. Could she do that? Could she allow herself to be vulnerable in a relationship built on a contract? She shook her head, trying to push the thoughts away. I'm sorry, Lucas, but I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to be anything other than what I've been. For the first time, Lucas seemed to soften completely. He stepped closer to her, his eyes searching hers. You're not alone in this, Anna. You don't have to do this alone. The sincerity in his voice made her pause. For a brief moment, she saw a different side of him. Not the cold, calculating businessman, but a man who was ... vulnerable, who was, in some strange way, asking for her to be vulnerable with him. Anna didn't know how to respond. She wasn't sure she could let her guard down. But in that moment, she knew one thing for certain. Her life was about to change in ways she couldn't predict, and she wasn't sure if she was ready for it. The days after the conversation in the penthouse felt like a delicate truce between Anna and Lucas. There was an unspoken understanding between them now. An acknowledgement that they both needed something more than just the role they had been playing. But despite the fragile bond that was beginning to form, there was still a wall between them, an invisible barrier they couldn't seem to cross. Anna's routine didn't change. She still attended the events, smiled for the cameras, and played the perfect wife. But something had shifted. Every time she saw Lucas, she felt a spark of something she couldn't deny, something she wasn't ready to face. The distance between them was still palpable, but in quieter moments, when they were alone, she found herself wondering what it would be like if they let the walls come down that night. After another lavish charity auction, Anna walked back into the penthouse, exhausted both physically and emotionally. The evening had been filled with polite conversation and forced laughter, but her mind kept returning to the same thoughts. What was this all for? Why had she agreed to all this? Was it just for money? For security? She walked into the living room, where Lucas was sitting on the couch, his gaze focused on the city skyline outside the window. He looked deep in thought, his jaw tight as he watched the lights twinkle below. There was something different about him tonight, something more vulnerable. Long night? She asked softly, standing in the doorway. He didn't turn to look at her immediately. He took a deep breath before responding. It always feels like a long night when it's just an act. His voice was low, and Anna could hear the weight of the words behind them. How about you? She hesitated. Same, pretending to be someone I'm not. Lucas finally turned to face her, his eyes searching hers. There was something raw in his expression that she hadn't seen before. He stood up slowly, moving closer to her. The space between them seemed to shrink with every step he took. Anna's heart started to race. She wasn't sure if it was the exhaustion or something else, but she could feel the air between them charged with an intensity she didn't know how to handle. You don't have to pretend with me, Anna, Lucas said quietly, his voice almost a whisper. Not anymore. I told you that before. She felt her breath catch in her throat. It was the first time he had said something like that to her since their agreement had started. The walls between them had been built on distance and duty, and now, for the first time, she felt the possibility of something else, something real. Lucas, ... double quotes, she began, but her words faltered. She didn't know what to say. Part of her wanted to step back, to keep the wall up and protect herself. But another part of her wanted to reach out, to give in to whatever it was that was growing between them. You don't have to keep doing this alone, he said again, his voice softer this time. "I may not be the person you imagined your life with, but I'm here. And if you let me, I'll be here for you." Anna's chest tightened. She was caught in a whirlwind of emotions she hadn't allowed herself to feel before. She'd spent so long protecting herself from the truth, focusing on the contract, on surviving, on fulfilling her end of the bargain. But now she found herself questioning everything. She took a step forward, feeling the pull toward him despite her better judgment. "I don't know what this is," she said quietly, her voice trembling slightly. "But I can't keep pretending I don't feel something." Lucas's gaze softened, and for a moment Anna saw the man behind the mask. He reached out slowly, as if unsure of how she would react, but when she didn't pull away, his hand brushed against hers. The touch was gentle, tentative, like a question being asked without words. "I've never wanted a fake marriage," he confessed. "I agreed to this because I had to. But I don't want it to be a lie anymore. And I don't want you to feel like you're trapped in this. You deserve more than that." Her heart skipped a beat at his words. He felt the same way. It was impossible to deny now. The barrier between them had cracked, and in that moment, it felt like everything was shifting. For the first time, she wasn't just playing a role. She wasn't just the wife in a contract. She was Anna, standing in front of a man who had been a stranger to her, yet was slowly becoming someone she couldn't ignore. Without thinking, she closed the distance between them, her hands resting lightly on his chest. "What if I want this to be real?" she whispered, the question hanging in the air like a fragile promise. Lucas's eyes searched hers for a long moment, as if weighing her words. Then he closed the distance between them completely. His lips met hers in a kiss that was soft at first, tentative, as if they were both unsure of what it meant. But the more their lips lingered, the more the kiss deepened, the tension and uncertainty between them melting away, replaced by a connection that neither of them had expected. When they pulled away, both of them were breathless, their foreheads touching as they stood in the quiet of the penthouse, the city lights flickering outside. "You've just made this a lot more complicated," Anna said softly, a small smile tugging at the corner of her lips. Lucas chuckled softly, his hand still resting on her cheek. "I think we've always been complicated, Anna, but I don't mind." The days that followed were a mixture of excitement and uncertainty. The wall between Anna and Lucas had come down, but in its place was something even more fragile: hope. They began spending more time together, not just for the sake of appearances, but because there was something between them now that neither of them could ignore. But the contract was still there, hanging over them, a reminder of the foundation their relationship had been built on. And as their connection grew deeper, Anna found herself wondering what would happen once the year was up. Would they go back to being strangers? Would Lucas still want her after everything was said and done? But for now, she pushed those thoughts aside. The future could wait. For the first time, she was allowing herself to live in the present, to experience something real with Lucas, and maybe, just maybe, this contract marriage could turn into something more. The following weeks passed in a blur of moments that felt real, but also distant. Like a dream, Anna wasn't sure she wanted to wake up from. She had let herself be vulnerable for the first time in years, and in doing so, she had allowed herself to care about Lucas. There was a connection between them now, something deeper than the surface-level interactions they'd shared at the start. But with every step forward, there was always the question hanging over her head: what happens when the contract ends? Anna had begun to ask herself that question more frequently. She spent the mornings in a daze, unsure of what her future with Lucas would look like. Would he still want her once the year was over? Would they go their separate ways, back to the lives they had before? Could she ever go back to living a life without him in it? But she refused to let herself dwell on it. Every moment she spent with him now felt like a gift, like something real, despite the foundation on which it was built. She told herself that when the time came, they would deal with the consequences. For now, she would simply live in the present. One evening, as they prepared for yet another high-profile charity event, Anna felt the familiar mix of nerves and exhaustion settle over her. She hadn't been sleeping well lately. Her mind was constantly racing, torn between the life she was living now and the one she had left behind. The glittering world of luxury, wealth, and fame had become her reality, but it wasn't the life she had envisioned for herself. It was a life of appearances, of pretending. As Anna finished getting ready in their bedroom, she caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror. The woman staring back at her seemed like a stranger, beautiful, polished, but distant. She was no longer the woman who had come to this city with hopes of a different future. She had become a part of Lucas's world, a world that was both intoxicating and suffocating at the same time. Anna. Lucas's voice called from the doorway. She turned to see him standing there, dressed in his usual tailored suit, his gaze softening when it landed on her. For a moment, their eyes met, and Anna felt the usual stir of emotions that seemed to rise between them whenever they shared a quiet moment together. Despite everything, there was a warmth in his eyes, something that had never been there in the beginning. "Ready?" he asked, his voice gentle. She smiled, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "I guess so." He stepped closer, his expression unreadable, and for a second it felt as though the world had slowed down. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face, his fingers lingering on her cheek. Anna's breath caught in her throat. The closeness, the intimacy, was something she had started to crave. She had become used to being with him, used to the warmth he offered when they were together, but the wall was still there between them and between what they had agreed upon. "What's going on in that head of yours?" Lucas asked, his voice low, the usual coolness replaced by a softness that sent a shiver down Anna's spine. She hesitated before answering, unsure how much she should reveal. She hadn't spoken about her fears before, not to him, not even to herself, just thinking about everything, she admitted finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "About this. About us." Lucas studied her for a moment, his eyes narrowing slightly as if he were trying to understand what she meant. "Us." His voice was cautious now, and Anna could sense a shift. He knew, as much as she did, that they were treading in dangerous territory. Anna looked away, her chest tight with the weight of her thoughts. "Yeah, about what happens when the year is over. What happens when this contract ends?" The silence between them stretched, thick and heavy. Anna could feel his presence behind her, but the emotional distance felt wider than ever. She didn't want to ask those questions. She didn't want to confront the truth that had been simmering beneath the surface for weeks. But the uncertainty was eating at her, and she couldn't ignore it anymore. Lucas stepped back, his expression unreadable. He looked like he was choosing his words carefully, but there was something in his eyes that told her he understood exactly what she was feeling. "We deal with it when the time comes," he said quietly, his voice betraying a hint of frustration. "I'm not going to pretend like I haven't been thinking about it too, Anna. But we agreed to this, and right now, this is what we have. This is what we need to focus on." Her heart sank. "This is what we have." He was right. They had both agreed to this, to the contract that kept them bound to one another. But in her heart, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. Something real had begun to grow between them, something that neither of them had planned for. "You're right," she said softly, turning away from him. "We deal with it when the time comes." Lucas didn't argue. He simply nodded, though there was a strange tension in the air now. Neither of them spoke as they left for the event, the silence between them louder than words. At the event, Anna played her part perfectly. She smiled for the cameras, exchanged pleasantries with the high-profile guests, and held Lucas's arm like the dutiful wife she was supposed to be. But beneath the surface, her mind was racing. Every laugh, every conversation felt like a performance. She could feel herself slipping further into the role she had created for herself, the perfect wife, the perfect partner, but with each passing day, it was harder to remember who she really was. Lucas was the same, as always, composed, confident, a man of power. He was the picture-perfect husband in public, charming and attentive. But Anna knew him differently now. She had seen glimpses of who he really was, his vulnerability, his quiet moments when the walls came down, and that made everything more complicated. By the time they returned to the penthouse, the event felt like a distant memory. Anna had once again played the role she had been assigned, and now she was left alone with her thoughts. She walked into their shared space, only to find Lucas standing near the window, looking out at the city lights below. "Lucas," she said quietly, her voice tentative, "are we really just playing pretend? Is that all this is?" He turned to her, his expression softened. "No, Anna, I don't think that's all it is." His words hung in the air between them, and for the first time in a long while, Anna let herself hope. Maybe, just maybe, there was something real beneath the surface after all. The days after the event felt like a delicate balance between Anna and Lucas, something unspoken, something both were afraid to name. They spent more time together in the penthouse, talking less about their marriage contract and more about their lives before everything had started. The walls they had built were beginning to crumble, piece by piece. But the contract still loomed over them, a constant reminder of the reality they couldn't escape. One evening, as they sat together on the balcony, watching the sun set over the city, the silence between them felt comfortable. For the first time, it wasn't forced. It wasn't about playing a part or maintaining an image. It was just them, two people who had been through something they never expected, and now, despite everything, were starting to understand each other on a level that went beyond the facade. "I've been thinking," Anna said, her voice soft as she gazed at the horizon. "About everything." Lucas turned to her, his expression guarded but attentive. "What about?" "The contract. This marriage. Us," she said, her heart pounding in her chest. "It's been a year, almost, and I don't know how to feel about it anymore." Lucas didn't say anything right away. He just watched her, as if waiting for her to continue, giving her space to speak. The breeze stirred her hair, and Anna brushed it back, her fingers trembling slightly. "I signed this contract because I thought it was the only way to fix things," Anna said, her eyes on the city below. "To help my family, to give my mom a chance. And now, I don't know what I'm doing anymore. I don't know if this is real. I don't know what we are." Lucas's gaze softened, and for the first time, there was no mask. No cold businessman in front of her, just a man, vulnerable in his own way. "I didn't expect to get this attached," he said, his voice quieter. I didn't expect you to get under my skin like this. But somewhere along the way, I realized that this wasn't just a contract. It became something more. Anna looked up at him, surprised by his words. What do you mean? I mean, Lucas hesitated, running a hand through his hair. I've been keeping my distance because I didn't want to get hurt. I've been protecting myself, just like you. But now, I can't pretend anymore. I care about you, Anna, more than I thought I would. Anna's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't expected him to say that, and yet it felt like a weight had been lifted, a burden she hadn't realized she was carrying. She was no longer alone in this. He felt it too. Her heart raced, and she could feel the distance between them evaporating. But the reality of their situation, the contract, the end of the year still hung in the air. An unspoken truth neither of them was willing to face just yet. I care about you too. Lucas, Anna said, her voice trembling. But I'm scared. I'm scared of what happens when the year is up. What happens when this contract is over? Do we just walk away? Pretend like none of this ever happened? Lucas reached out and took her hand in his touch warm and grounding. I don't know what will happen, but I don't want to walk away from this, from you. Whatever happens, we'll figure it out. Together, the final month of their contract came quicker than either of them had anticipated. The parties, the events, the public appearances, they all blurred together. The time they had spent together in the penthouse, talking, laughing, and sharing moments of vulnerability felt like a distant dream. The love they had developed was real, undeniable, but it was also tainted by the contract that still hung over their heads. As the end of the year approached, Anna and Lucas found themselves at a crossroads. The tension between them had reached its peak, and neither of them knew what the future held. One evening, as they sat in the living room, Anna felt the weight of the moment. The contract was about to expire, and she knew that everything was about to change. I don't want this to end, Anna said softly, her eyes meeting Lucas's. I don't want to go back to how things were before. Lucas's gaze softened, and he reached out to take her hand. Neither do I. But even as he said the words, Anna knew the reality of their situation couldn't be ignored. The contract was a business agreement, a legal bond that would dissolve once it expired. But everything they had built, the trust, the connection, the feelings couldn't be erased so easily. Then what? Anna asked, her voice shaking. What happens when the year is over? What do we do? Lucas didn't answer right away. He simply looked at her, as though he were weighing his words carefully. What do you want, Anna? Anna's heart skipped a beat. What did she want? She had never given herself permission to think beyond the contract, beyond the life she had agreed to. But now, with Lucas's hand in hers, she realized that she wanted more. She wanted the life they had started to build together without the contract, without the pretenses. I want us, Anna said, her voice steady. I want a future with you, not just a year, but a life. Lucas's eyes softened, and he pulled her close, his lips meeting hers in a kiss that was full of promise. When they pulled away, he looked at her with a tenderness she hadn't seen before. I want that too, he said, his voice quiet but full of conviction. The contract ends today, Anna, but I don't want this to end. I want you, not just for a year, but for as long as you'll have me. Anna's heart swelled with emotion, and for the first time since they had started this journey, she felt like everything had fallen into place. They had both been afraid, holding back, But now they were ready to take the leap into a future together. No contracts, no conditions, as the clock ticked down to the final moment of the year. They stood together, knowing that the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but it would be theirs. The love they had found was real, and that was all that mattered. A few months later, Anna stood in the garden of their new home, watching Lucas as he walked toward her. He smiled, his eyes full of love and contentment, and she couldn't help but smile back. The life they had built together was far from perfect, but it was real. They had faced the uncertainty of their contract and come out stronger on the other side. Lucas had made it clear that he wasn't just in it for a year, and Anna had finally allowed herself to believe it. They had built something lasting, something genuine, and now they were free to create a future together. "I guess this is it," Anna said, laughing as Lucas wrapped his arms around her. "Yeah," Lucas replied, holding her close. "But this is just the beginning."